Hey guys, tonight we are slipping into the most delicate, politically charged, and frankly, sexiest era of Japanese history, the Heian period. We're not here for samurai showdowns or massive wars. We're here for whispering silks, coded poems, and the subtle, slow burn art of seduction in old Kyoto, or as it was known then, Heian-kyō. Picture yourself not in some rough feudal shack, but surrounded by carved wood, sliding screens, and the scent of smoldering incense. The air is thick with humidity and the quiet menace of courtly gossip. You trudge along the unpaved grid of the capital city, the wooden wheels of ox carts creaking nearby, a sound that, ironically, is the noisiest thing in this ancient town. It's the late 10th century, and the city is laid out in a perfect, sprawling checkerboard, modeled after the Chinese capital, Chang'an, a massive flex by the emperor. This city is the cultural heart of Japan, a place where beauty, poetry, and social standing are the ultimate weapons. You probably won't survive this world of intrigue and delicate social dance without a hefty dose of luck and an even heftier knowledge of waka poetry. Mess up a single syllable and you're exiled socially forever, which, let's be honest, is a fate worse than getting cut down by a rogue arrow. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where are you tuning in from and what time is it where you are? I love seeing the global, sleepy community gather here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of the sprawling compound that makes up the Dai-dairy, the massive enclosure housing the Imperial Palace and various government ministries. It's less of a single imposing castle and more of a maze of low-slung, elegant wooden buildings surrounded by gravel courtyards and manicured gardens. The aesthetic is called Shindenzukuri, a style defined by its simplicity, its use of natural wood, and those fantastic sliding shoji and fusana screens that keep the interior space infinitely adaptable. Everything feels open, airy, yet somehow perfectly private. But forget the architecture for a second and feel the atmosphere. It's heavy with expectation. You've been brought here, perhaps as an attendant to a noble family or maybe a minor official. The specific details are blissfully fuzzy, designed to let you sink in fully. What matters is that you are inside the bubble, and the bubble is intoxicating. The true centers of power here aren't the government offices, they are the apartments of the high-ranking women. In this era, the most powerful family, the Fujiwara clan, operated a brilliant strategy, marrying their daughters to the emperor and then ruling from behind the scenes as regents to their own grandchildren. The women are key. They are the conduits of power, the silent operators, and, crucially for our story, the objects of intense, highly ritualized desire. You hear the soft, distant strumming of the koto, the long zither. It's a sound that permeates the night air, often signaling a lady of high status passing her time. Learning to play the koto, or the biwa, a kind of lute, was mandatory. Think of it as the Heian version of having a good Spotify playlist. It was essential to your personal brand. You smile thinking how awkward it would be to try to seduce someone only to reveal you're terrible at both poetry and musical instruments. That's a straight shot to social oblivion, my friend. You step over a low wooden sill. Always be mindful of that. Tripping is not a good look. And into a corridor. The wood under your feet is polished smooth by centuries of shuffling sandals. Outside, the darkness is absolute because, no city streetlights. Only portable lanterns or the moonlight guide you. This is why the sense of smell and hearing are so crucial in the court of Heian. You couldn't see who was coming, but you could definitely hear the distinctive rustle of their silk layers, and most importantly, you could smell their incense blend. The fragrance you use is your signature. Ladies spent hours layering perfumes into their robes, creating complex, personal blends. Think of it as the ultimate luxury artisanal fragrance, but you have to make it yourself. A man might send a poetic letter. and the judge of the poem's quality was often influenced by how good the accompanying scent smelled. Historians still argue whether the quality of the poem or the expensive rarity of the incense had a bigger impact on a lady's decision to reply. Probably the incense. Let's be real. It's always about the packaging.
You catch a whiff of something that is definitely aloes wood or chiara, a rich, deep, slightly smoky scent layered maybe with sandalwood. It's a noble scent, a subtle, heavy cloud that precedes the wearer. It signals not just wealth, but an impeccable, refined taste. A little fringe tidbit here. They often kept little pouches of dried, fragrant materials called nioi bukuro, tied to their robes, not just for the scent, but also to keep insects away. So your attempt at being devastatingly romantic also serves a very practical purpose, acting as a fancy insect repellent. Multitasking. Heian style. Your own robes, you notice, feel perfectly weighted. You are wearing a complex arrangement of silk, maybe not the full 12 layers or juni hitoe of a top-tier court lady. That's certainly enough to give you that wonderfully voluminous silhouette. The colors aren't just random. They follow a strict seasonal palette known as Kasane no Iroeme. Think deep purple layered with light green for early spring willow, or white layered with red for plum blossom. Getting the colors wrong was, again, social suicide. It showed a lack of sensitivity to the season, to fashion, and ultimately to beauty itself, which was the highest value. You pass a screen hearing the low, murmured conversation of women inside. You dare not look. Direct sight was avoided, especially with noblewomen. They were shielded by curtains, folding screens, and their own massive sleeves. To catch sight of a noble lady's face was an act of extreme transgression, potentially even a prelude to a romantic pursuit that you might not be ready for, or, more likely, a gross breach of etiquette. It's the ultimate look but don't touch culture, where attraction builds on imagination and suggestion. This is the great challenge of Heian life: how to seduce someone you can barely see and often only communicate with through a carefully chosen go-between and a perfectly crafted poem. The very structures of the palace, the shoji screens that glow faintly with lantern light, the sudare bamboo blinds that reveal only a shadow, are designed to heighten anticipation and mystery. Everything is about suggestion, the art of the veiled hint. You remember the mainstream historical fact that governed everything. Rank and birth were immutable. You could be the most talented poet or the most handsome man, but if you didn't have the right connections and the right birth status, your career at court was strictly capped. Yet love, or at least the game of love, provided a tiny loophole, an area where personal charisma and skill in the arts could briefly, dangerously transcend your station. As you reach your own modest dwelling within the compound, you feel the fatigue of the long journey and the mental exhaustion of navigating the subtle currents of court life. The smell of aloes wood lingers in the air, the koto music is fading. You draw a thick curtain of state, kicho, around your sleeping area. It's not just for privacy, it's a necessary tool for maintaining rank and decorum. No one, absolutely no one, ever sees your sleeping form or your messy reality. You are only ever seen as the highly refined, scented, poetic figure you present. You settle onto the layered floor mats, the sounds of the night, a distant bell, the croaking of frogs in the nearby marsh, lulling you. You close your eyes, knowing tomorrow the true game begins. The silent communication, the subtle flirtations, and the hunt for the perfect line of poetry to convey everything you dare not say aloud. The elegance of Heian-kyō is deceptive. It is the most dangerous, delicate playground for the heart.
The sun has risen, scattering the morning mist over the meticulously raked gravel of the palace compound. Today, you are moving through the outer edges of the Shishinden area, where the grand formal ceremonies take place. Though this early, it's mostly quiet. You're on an errand. A perfectly legitimate, boring reason to be in a place where subtle drama unfolds constantly. You are acutely aware that even when simply walking, you are performing. Every movement here is scrutinized. Your posture, the way you adjust your long, trailing robes, the angle of your head, it all speaks volumes about your breeding and your sense of self. It's exhausting, frankly, like constantly being in a slow-motion fashion show where the judges are all silent and perpetually judgmental. You pass the edge of a pleasure garden, which is less about manicured English roses and more about a carefully constructed, artful imitation of nature. Mossy stones, dwarf pines, and a small serpentine stream that gurgles softly. It's here, amidst the rustling bamboo and the scent of damped earth, that the story really starts to thicken. You spot her. Or rather, you spot the curtain of state, Kyoto, draped around a temporary pavilion set up near the stream, an outdoor space designed for contemplation or perhaps a light poetry gathering. You know without being told that a high-ranking lady is behind that veil. The way the light hits the silk of the curtain, the faint shadow of a person sitting inside, the barely audible sound of silk layers being adjusted, these are your only clues. And then the whisper in the garden begins. This is the ultimate Heian flirting zone. Unlike the direct, often loud courtships of Western history, seduction here is an exercise in extreme indirection. It's about being noticed without appearing to seek attention. You, of course, can't just stride up to the Kyoto and introduce yourself. That's simply not done. Your job is to send a signal. Maybe you deliberately pause near the enclosure, making sure the perfume you carefully layered this morning drifts gently into her space. You might let a beautifully folded fan drop accidentally, hoping a knowing attendant will retrieve it and present it as evidence of your proximity. Or the classic move. You recite a spontaneous, low-voiced koem related to the garden's beauty or the melancholic sound of the stream, making sure the words are just loud enough to carry through the sudare, bamboo blinds, but not so loud as to be brazen. Let's pause for a little historical context. The mainstream historical fact about communication in this era is that writing was a highly valued art form. Calligraphy was considered as important as the poem's content. A man might be rejected not because his poetry was terrible, but because his brush strokes were sloppy or his paper choice was tacky. You spent years practicing your script, developing a style as unique as your voice. It wasn't just what you said, it was how you literally penned the words. So you choose your moment. You look toward a magnificent cherry tree that has just burst into bloom, a temporary, ephemeral beauty. You sigh, a very subtle, poetic sigh, and murmur a waka that captures the fleeting nature of life and beauty. Something like, the briefest spring light touches the branches of sakura, yet memory blooms forever. Self-correction moment. I need a light joke now. Let's insert a gentle aside. You realize that your subtle sigh probably sounded like a tiny, distressed rodent, and you quickly correct your posture. You think, the stress of trying to sound perfectly soulful and not like I just stubbed my toe on a rock is truly the biggest obstacle to romance. It's a lot of pressure just to get someone to reply to your text message, which in this case is an actual handwritten poem on scented paper.
Now we wait. The lady inside, if she is interested, will not respond herself. That would be far too forward. She will consult her trusted lady-in-waiting, her messenger, her confidant, and often her ghostwriter. This lady-in-waiting, or nyobo, is the real power broker of the Heian court. She is the gatekeeper, and you must win her approval first.
Think of her as a very stern, highly efficient dating app algorithm that you must manually bypass. The quirky or fringe tidbit of the day is that women rarely used their given names in public or in correspondence. They were known by titles related to their rank, their husband's rank, or even the location of their residence. Like the famous author of the Tale of Genji, who was known as Murasaki Shikibu. Murasaki being a nickname derived from a character in her book, and Shikibu referencing her father's post in the Ministry of Rights. This anonymity added another layer of mystery, making the pursuit not just about the person, but about the idea of the noble woman. You are seducing an enigma. You linger just long enough to ensure your poem has been heard and absorbed. Then you glide away, never looking back. To stare would be desperate. To rush away would be rude. You must strike the perfect balance between interest and aloofness. You've cast your line into the pond, now you walk away and wait for the subtle, hopeful tug. Later that afternoon, a very small, perfectly folded piece of paper is delivered to your lodging by an attendant. It's tied with an exquisitely chosen sprig of cherry blossom, perhaps the very kind you referenced in your poem. The attendant is utterly neutral, revealing nothing. You take the poem, your heart rate barely registering a change. You are a courtier, you are cool, and dismiss the messenger. Only then do you unfold the paper. You immediately check the calligraphy. Is it smooth, confident, graceful? Yes, good. Is the paper scented with an intriguing blend, perhaps lighter and sweeter than your own aloes would, suggesting a complementary nature? Yes, excellent. Now, the content. Her reply must be ambiguous yet encouraging. It cannot commit her fully, but it must acknowledge your poetic skill and perhaps offer a faint, veiled hint that she noticed you. Something like, "The spring light is indeed fleeting, but one must ensure one is not gazing only upon the blossoms of a borrowed tree." This is her first subtle parry. She has noted your poem's beauty, but lightly cautioned you about the nature of courtly relationships, perhaps hinting that your current attention is fleeting, or that you might be trifling with her. It's an invitation to a poetic duel. Historians still argue whether these initial exchanges were primarily driven by genuine romantic interest or pure social obligation and intellectual sport. The pressure to respond beautifully was intense, regardless of personal feelings, because a poorly handled exchange reflected badly on her entire family's reputation for culture and taste. Your task now is to craft a poem that simultaneously reassures her of your sincerity, acknowledges her clever caution, and advances your romantic intention, all within 5 lines, the 5-7-5-7-7 structure of a waka. You must be witty, refined, deeply sincere, and utterly respectful. It's like writing a 5-line novel that determines your future happiness. You spend the rest of the day meticulously drafting, correcting, and recopying the waka. You test various incense blends on small scraps of paper, trying to find the one that perfectly matches your emotional state, something that speaks of longing, but also stability. Perhaps a blend heavy on musk and cedar, serious intent, grounding, a man who knows what he wants. As twilight falls, you finalize your poem. You tie it with a thin strand of silk, the color chosen to perfectly complement the lady's robe color, which you manage to learn through discreet channels. You're not a total amateur. You dispatch the poem with your own trusted servant. The fate of your burgeoning romance now rests entirely on a few carefully chosen syllables and the way you manage to smell good while delivering them. The soft light of the evening lanterns begins to glow behind the shoji screens. The game is afoot, and it is a game played entirely in the twilight, through intermediaries, and through the delicate, potent language of poetry and perfume. The wait after dispatching your second poem is perhaps the most exquisite agony of Heian-kyō. It is not a wait of minutes, but potentially days, during which you must act entirely normal, attending to your court duties while your entire emotional future hangs on a delicate, scented slip of paper. You're a refined official on the outside, but inside you are a nervous wreck who just sent a 5-line, heavily perfumed confession and is desperately hoping the recipient's ghostwriter approves of the meter. The challenge of poetry and pillow talk here is that the poem is the pillow talk. It must stand in for all the intimate conversation, the playful banter, and the deep vulnerability that might take weeks in a modern courtship. Your poem needs to be technically perfect, precisely 31 syllables, divided into the 5-7-5-7-7 structure of a waka. No more, no less. It's a beautifully confining form. You recall your response, which aimed to be both serious and flirtatious. The tree I gaze upon has roots that run so deeply. This is no borrowed bloom. If I may then touch the leaves, my sincerity you'll know. You hope the reference to the borrowed tree from her previous note showed you understood her veiled warning about fickleness, while your closing line was a clear yet deferential declaration of intent. Historians still argue whether the themes of melancholy and ephemeral beauty in Heian poetry were genuine philosophical reflections or merely necessary conventions for literary sophistication. Either way, you had to make sure your sincerity shone through the flowery language, or the entire effort would be dismissed as mere wordplay. Another light joke bubbles up. You wonder if anyone ever accidentally swapped poems, perhaps sending a heartfelt declaration intended for a lover to their grumpy, demanding supervisor. The resulting waka response would probably be less about love and more about demanding the return of state property, the administrative nightmare alone. After what feels like an eternity of anxiety, your trusted attendant returns, bearing not a reply, but a message, spoken, not written, indicating the seriousness of the situation. It's an invitation to advance, a tiny victory. The message is from the nyobo, the lady-in-waiting, not the lady herself, and it is brutally pragmatic. The lady has been moved by your brush. She permits a visit at the hour of the rat, provided your conduct is impeccable. Impeccable conduct. That's Heian code for don't embarrass us, don't trip, don't be late, and definitely don't talk too much. This is your first midnight rendezvous, the culmination of the poetic dance. It is called yobai, which literally means night crawling or night visiting. The mainstream historical fact here is that a successful, accepted night visit was often the start of the relationship, not the end of the courtship. It was a trial marriage. If the man failed to show up for the second and third nights, the relationship was considered over and the lady's reputation suffered a permanent, painful blow. This is why you cannot afford any mistakes. Your hands cramp momentarily as you think about all the calligraphy practice you endured as a youth. The stress was unreal. Your entire love life literally rested on the aesthetic beauty of your handwriting. You mutter, "If only my future spouse could have judged me on my superior spreadsheet skills, I'd have been married years ago." Before setting out, you must perfect your appearance. This is where the quirky or fringe tidbit comes in. In the Heian period, nobles, especially men, often wore a small, audible announcement of their arrival. When you approach her gate, which is probably guarded by a dozing elderly attendant, you can't just knock. That's far too vulgar. Instead, you perform an elaborate, ritualized clearing of your throat, perhaps a low, carefully modulated cough that signals a person of high breeding, excellent taste, and perfect poetic skill is arriving. It's a very specific, almost theatrical sound, meant to be heard but not intrusive. It's the Heian era equivalent of honking your customized chariot horn.
You dress meticulously, layering your robes for maximum effect. Since it is night, the colors matter less than the texture and arrangement. The subtle rustle of the layered silk, the weight of the fabric,
the faint but persistent aroma of your personal incense. These are the only ways you will communicate to her before you've even properly spoken. You also prepare a subtle gift. Nothing garish. That would imply you were trying to buy her affection. Perhaps a perfectly ripened persimmon tied with a ribbon, or a single, beautifully folded sheet of imported Chinese paper, a luxurious item not often seen in the capital. It's a gift that speaks of thoughtfulness and rarity rather than pure expense. Your go-between, the nyobo, is the key to your access. She has smoothed the path, ensuring the lady's parents, who often lived in the same massive compound, remember, are unaware, or at least pretending to be unaware. This adds a humorous tension to the whole affair. The elderly family head knows exactly what's happening, but because the correct protocol is being observed, the kicho is up, the attendants are silent, the poem was excellent, he can maintain the fiction of his daughter's immaculate isolation. It's a very polite, theatrical conspiracy. The journey to her quarters involves navigating the moonlit gravel paths of the huge compound. You move in a deliberate, measured pace. You are conscious of the soft glow of the lanterns behind the sliding screens of the noble residences, each one a tiny world of intrigue and artistry. The court is asleep, yet it is never truly silent. The night is full of the sounds of the wind chimes, the gentle lapping of water, and the rustling of your own voluminous robes. You arrive at the perimeter of her personal quarters. This is the moment where the poetry stops and the terrifying reality of social interaction begins. You must present yourself, perform the ritualized throat clearing and wait. The small folded letter of waka was easy. It was a performance you could control. This, however, is live theater. You only hope that the attendant who greets you isn't the same one who delivers your poems. Imagine the awkward small talk. Lovely weather for an illicit affair, isn't it? By the way, your calligraphy on the borrowed tree poem was truly superb. You approach the entrance where a thick, brocaded curtain of state is hung. Your fate now rests in the hands of the nyobo, who is waiting just beyond. You are about to step from the world of poetic abstraction into the very real, scented, silk-rustling world of a Heian lady's chamber. The ultimate test is not the poem you wrote, but the impression you make in the first 5 minutes of unspoken, veiled presence. You are now standing at the threshold of the lady's world, having successfully navigated the poetic gauntlet and the terrifying process of the ritualistic throat clear. The scent that greets you upon entering the immediate, curtained area is distinct from the one you detected earlier and definitely stronger than the outdoor air. It's an immersive experience in veils, silk, and scents. You are ushered gently by the nobo, who remains a formidable, silent presence, to a space separated from the lady by a tall, decorative curtain of state, kicho, and possibly an inner bamboo blind, sudari. You are not in the same room, but in the adjoining space, close enough for conversation, but far enough for propriety. This is the Heian dating booth, where physical sight is replaced by heightened sensory input. The mainstream historical fact here concerns the importance of layered silk robes, or junihitoe, literally 12-layer robe, worn by high-ranking women. This wasn't merely fashion, it was a form of protective architecture and wealth display. The actual number of layers varied, often fewer than 12, but the critical part was the kasane wo irome, the layering of colors. Imagine trying to match paint swatches perfectly, but your failure results in social ruin. These combinations changed seasonally and even according to the occasion, Acting as a visual code, you might see a flash of pale green silk under a darker plum layer, a complex, silent statement about the wearer's taste and current mood. Now focus on the scent. Her personal incense blend is your primary source of intimacy. It's an intoxicating cloud of fragrance, probably designed and blended by the lady and her attendants over many weeks. You identify key notes, maybe some rare musk, indicating power and expense, mingled with the sweet, delicate aroma of cloves, and perhaps a sharp counterpoint of camphor. It is specifically her scent, her olfactory signature. This sensory immersion is the entire point. Since you cannot see her face, you must use your imagination, which is, let's face it, usually far more powerful than reality. You listen to the way her silk robes shift as she moves slightly behind the kicho. It is a soft, rhythmic rustling sound that is utterly sensual, a gentle shh that tells you everything about her graceful presence and the expensive quality of the textiles. A quirky or fringe tidbit about these robes, they were heavy, like really heavy. We're talking several pounds of layered silk dragging behind the wearer. Moving with grace in a junihitoi was a physical feat, proving not only wealth, but also the discipline required to master such cumbersome elegance. You realize, with a small internal smirk, that being physically fit enough to carry around 10 pounds of silk without visibly straining was actually a key part of Heian femininity. Who needs a gym when you have elaborate court robes? Your first verbal exchange is predictably restrained. You speak softly through the kicho. Your voice must be cultivated and melodious. You begin not with a declaration of love, but with a courteous, poetic remark about the beauty of the moon outside or the lovely scent of her room. You are both dancing around the central subject for as long as possible. The longer the elegant delay, the more refined the courtship.
She replies, her voice coming to you as a soft murmur, slightly muffled by the screens and curtains. You focus on the quality of her speech. Is it well educated? Does she pause correctly? Her voice is now as crucial as her poetry. This is the first time you are hearing her, not reading her words. It solidifies the connection. The nyobo occasionally intervenes, asking a polite question about your journey or the weather, acting as a conversational buffer, or perhaps a spy for the family. You must treat this attendant with the utmost respect. She is literally holding the keys to the kingdom. The conversation naturally drifts to poetry. She might challenge you on an interpretation of an old waka, or perhaps present you with a new, spontaneous verse. You must be witty, knowledgeable, and slightly flattering. You engage in a gentle intellectual sparring that builds tension without crossing any social boundaries. This is the real pillow talk, the meeting of minds. You notice one of her sleeves peeking out from behind the curtain, a subtle, deliberate reveal. This is a huge gesture. Because she is veiled, the sleeve of her robe acts as her proxy. It's a burst of color and texture that stands in for her physical presence. The layering of colors on the sleeve is exquisite, showing an advanced, perfect understanding of the Kasane no Irome seasonal conventions. It is a highly aestheticized glimpse into her world. You must acknowledge the subtle beauty with an appropriate, non-verbal expression of appreciation. A small, drawn-out sigh of delight, perhaps. This interaction hinges entirely on inference and imagination. You have to imagine the face and form that goes with the scented air, the soft voice, and the perfectly layered silk sleeve. The romance is built entirely in the space between the senses and the intellect.
Historians still argue whether the extreme modesty and veiling of noblewomen was a societal constraint or a powerful tool for women to control the narrative of their own image and desirability. By keeping their physical appearance a mystery, they forced men to court them based on their wit, their artistry, and their sheer command of aesthetics, giving them a distinct advantage in the game. The atmosphere is thick with potential energy. You lean forward slightly, adopting a posture that shows both respect and keen interest. You talk about a shared memory of a recent festival or a distant view of a temple, establishing common ground and shared experience. Every word is chosen for maximum impact and minimum commitment. You are creating a tapestry of shared culture and feeling, piece by careful piece. As the hour of the rat approaches midnight, the conversation reaches its natural crescendo. There is a comfortable silence. The nyobo finally withdraws with a silent, meaningful nod. This is the ultimate sign of acceptance. The separation of the curtain remains, but the social distance has collapsed. You are now, officially, alone with her. The ultimate seduction in old Kyoto is a silent, scented, poetic consent. The silence that follows the departure of the nyobo is electric, a weighty confirmation that you have passed the initial, excruciating layers of social screening. You are now in the space of possibility. The soft scent of the lady's incense blend seems to intensify, wrapping around you in the dark. The faint glow filtering through the screens suggests the moon is now high, illuminating the world in silver, making the subtle colors of your own robes appear muted and mysterious. But wait, a sudden rustle, not of silk, but of political intrigue, pulls your mind away from the immediate, sensory cocoon. Because even love at court is never truly private, it is always susceptible to the shifting tectonic plates of power. The mainstream historical fact we must address is the concept of relocating the capital. While Heian-kyō was, of course, the primary seat for centuries, there were temporary moments, often driven by intense political maneuvering or even perceived bad omens, when the court packed up and moved. A classic example is the brief, tumultuous move to Fukuhara-kyo during the Genpei War era. Though our story remains centered in the Heian period proper, the threat of a move was a constant, destabilizing reality. You suddenly recall that the minister of the left, a rival of the Fujiwara family who currently controls the lady's immediate sphere of influence, has been pushing for a temporary, ritual move to a new location, perhaps to escape a perceived curse or to shift economic advantages. This political tremor vibrates through the lady's world. Imagine the chaos. Shifting seats of power meant hastily packing up the Kicho, the Biwa, the Koto, and most importantly, the entire apparatus of refined court life. For a romantic relationship, this was either a death blow or a secret opportunity. If the court moved, you might be separated by a significant, uncomfortable distance. Your meticulously crafted poems and scents would be entrusted to couriers traveling unfamiliar, potentially dangerous roads. This geographical separation immediately forces the courtship back onto the most abstract and dangerous level: pure, unadulterated poetry. Could your bond survive the move? Could your poetry remain captivating when delivered weeks late, smelling faintly of dusty saddle leather instead of fresh aloes wood? This reality check adds a layer of urgency to your current silent presence. You realize that what is happening now, behind this curtain, might be a fleeting grace period before political machinations tear you apart. This is why the Heian nobles were so obsessed with the ephemeral beauty of the cherry blossom, sakura. Everything perfect was viewed as temporary, constantly threatened by decay, war, or, in this case, a forced geographical shift.
You exchange another quiet remark with the lady, this time about the rumors of the capital's potential shift. She replies with a verse that alludes to the uncertainty of the moorings of a fishing boat, subtly linking the instability of the state to the instability of your burgeoning relationship. It's brilliant, a political jab wrapped up in a romantic metaphor. She is using her vulnerability as a weapon, testing your loyalty and commitment against the backdrop of political risk. Time for a light joke. You think of the enormous effort required to move just your own wardrobe, realizing the logistical nightmare of relocating 1,000 courtiers and their entire collection of scented silk. It must have smelled incredible, but I guarantee half the Fujiwara family lost their favorite hair ornaments. A courtly tragedy indeed. The quirky or fringe tidbit concerning these moves is that superstition played a massive role. Moves were often justified by onmyoji, geomancers who interpreted omens, read the stars, and advised on the best directions for travel and new seating arrangements. The political elites frequently used these supernatural excuses to displace rivals or isolate an emperor they wished to control. So your love life is literally being dictated by a guy with a stick drawing lines in the dirt based on whether the wind blew the wrong way last Tuesday. Historians still argue whether the frequency of these temporary moves demonstrated the emperor's ritual power or was merely a symptom of the declining centralization of effective government. For you, the answer is simple. It threatens your ability to perform the ritualized throat clear at her gate. Your conversation now shifts to a more personal space, acknowledging the risk you both are taking. She speaks, her voice just a breathy whisper about the pressure of family expectations. Being a noblewoman, especially one tied to a powerful clan, meant every action, every poem, every reply was scrutinized. Your courtship is not just a romance, it is a potential alliance or a scandalous risk for her entire lineage. You respond, ensuring your voice conveys a deep, anchoring reassurance. You speak of your own family's distant lands, not powerful, but stable, and the quality of your character, which you hope she has already determined from the elegance of your prose and the depth of your musk and cedar blend. You reach out, cautiously, toward the Kicho. This is the moment where physical proximity acknowledges the collapse of social distance. You don't touch the curtain itself, but your hand hovers near the heavy silk, feeling the residual warmth of the lady's presence filtering through the expensive fabric. It is a silent, profound gesture, a commitment to close the gap that politics and propriety demand. You hold this pose of restrained longing, letting the political reality of the unstable capital, the beautiful poetry, and the overwhelming scent blend into a powerful emotional cocktail. The threat of separation has only served to sharpen the delicate intimacy of the present moment. You know that if the court moves, the memory of this scented, veiled conversation is all you will have to sustain you through weeks of travel and uncertainty. You are not merely courting a woman, you are negotiating a relationship against the backdrop of imperial instability, a fight where the only weapons you possess are impeccable taste and a mastery of the five-line poem. And in this perilous, fleeting moment of stillness, beneath the cold moon, she offers a new waka, delivered not through an attendant, but whispered directly through the curtain. A promise, veiled in elegant despair, about the beauty that can survive even a forced relocation. It's your cue to leave, but to leave knowing that you have been invited back. You have successfully concluded your first intimate conversation, leaving with the lingering scent of her perfume on your robes and the haunting melody of her whispered waka in your memory. The relationship is now established, but in this world, establishment simply means the work has just begun. To cement your bond, you need to elevate the connection beyond mere courtly flirtation. You need a shared spiritual experience, a temple retreat, and hidden vows. The mainstream historical fact is that Buddhism and Shintoism were deeply integrated into Heian court life. Courtiers were intensely concerned with karma, rituals, and the pursuit of salvation. Retreating to a secluded temple, often on Mount Hiei near the capital, or to a remote compound, was common for meditation, ritual purification, or temporary escape from court politics. This spiritual journey offers you a perfect cover for a secret meeting. You arrange, through discreet channels and with the help of the always useful Nyobo, a synchronized retreat. Perhaps she has legitimate family business at a specific temple, or needs to perform a purification ritual due to a recent bad omen. Remember those pesky omyoji? You, conveniently, find yourself needing to study some obscure sutra at the same isolated location. The beauty of this lie is that it's entirely plausible within the cultural context. The journey itself is a welcome change from the tight confines of the court. You travel, veiled and discreet, through the forested hills outside Heian-kyō. The air smells of pine and damp earth, a sharp contrast to the smoke and heavy perfumes of the palace. Upon arriving at the secluded temple compound, you find a small, temporary dwelling has been prepared for the lady. It is simple, built of natural materials, but still screened by tall sudare and kicho. The setting, however, is what transforms the affair. The serene isolation of the place encourages a deeper, more profound intimacy than the busy, gossipy capital ever could. This is where the concept of hidden passion blossoms. Here, far from the critical eyes of her family, the conversations become less about poetic one-upsmanship and more about genuine feeling. You still speak softly, but the words carry more weight, less performance. You discuss your dreams, your fears, the quiet intimacy in sharing true vulnerability, amplified by the silent, towering presence of the surrounding nature. The quirky or fringe tidbit concerning these retreats. Some temples and monasteries became surprisingly famous for their aesthetic appeal and were effectively used as high-end romantic hideaways. They were places where the rules were slightly relaxed, allowing courtiers to see each other without the usual dozen layers of screening. Imagine a sort of ancient spiritual luxury glamping trip designed specifically for illicit meetings. You might even catch a glimpse of the lady's face in the dapple sunlight, a breathtaking momentary gift that replaces the thousands of scented poems. It is during this retreat that you propose the secret vow, not a formal marriage which requires massive family negotiations, but a personal, binding promise. You might visit the temple's main altar, not for public prayer, but for a private pledge to the lady, or to the kami, Shinto deities of the mountain. You may share a cup of sacred sake, or tie 2 strips of paper, one with your vow, one with hers, to a single branch of the nearby cedar tree. This act is deeply significant because while the formal marriage process was controlled by families, a spiritual, hidden vow tied your karma together. It was a commitment before the gods, something the court and her family could not easily undo. A light joke to ease the spiritual tension. You observe a grumpy-looking monk sweeping the gravel with an enormous bamboo broom, realizing that even the most devout places had to deal with the mundane. I bet that guy has seen more illicit courtly romance than any 5 courtesans combined, and he probably just wants everyone to stop scattering their scented poem scraps on his perfectly raked Zen garden. Historians still argue whether these religious retreats and vows represented a true escape from courtly materialism, or if they were simply another, more refined layer of aesthetic performance designed to make the relationship appear more exclusive and profound. For you, the intention is clear. You need to create a bond that is protected by spiritual seriousness, beyond the reach of the Fujiwara clan's political maneuvers. You spend several nights in this rarefied atmosphere, the conversations deepening, the silence shared becoming more comfortable, more meaningful. The gentle, rhythmic ringing of the temple bell marks the hours, a soft metallic sound that contrasts beautifully with the rustle of your silks. You learn about the small, charming details of her personality that no poem could ever convey. The slight tremor in her voice when she talks about her childhood, or the way she prefers to sit near the sound of running water. As the time for the retreat ends, the secret vow is complete. You leave the temple grounds, your hearts tethered by an invisible spiritual cord. The return to Heian-kyō and the confines of the court will be a painful adjustment, but the shared memory of the retreat and the profound vows exchanged under the ancient cedars provides a solid foundation for your relationship. You now share a secret that no one at the court, no jealous rival, no suspicious parent can ever take away. You have transitioned from poetic admirer to karmic partner.
Back in the electric humidity of Heian-kyō, the relationship you forged during the secluded temple retreat must now withstand the daily pressures of court life. The stakes are higher, the connection is deeper, and the need for secrecy is paramount. Your next goal is to successfully infiltrate the innermost sanctuary of her world, the lady's chamber revealed. The residence of a high-ranking noblewoman was not a single fixed room. It was typically a portion of a larger family compound, often centered around a core living space known as the moya. This space was highly flexible, defined and partitioned by movable screens. The mainstream historical fact is that Heian residential architecture, Shinden-zukuri, prioritized flexibility and openness to nature. Rooms were partitioned using fusuma, painted sliding screens, byobu, folding screens, and shoji, translucent paper screens, meaning privacy was always temporary and contingent. The lady's chamber, therefore, is less like a locked bedroom and more like a beautifully curated, layered sanctuary. You, having now moved beyond the initial veiled conversations, are granted access deeper into this private space. You are brought in after dark, of course, performing the ritualized throat clear and handing your sandals over to the attendant. You slip past the various layers of screens and draperies that normally shield her. This is where you gain an intimate understanding of the domestic architecture and its role in keeping secrets. The layout is designed to allow light and air, but also to make snooping nearly impossible. A folding screen, byobu, might feature a gorgeous painted scene, maybe scenes from the Chinese classics or a seasonal landscape, but it serves the very practical function of hiding the lady and her attendants from prying eyes across the sonoku, the wide verandas surrounding the house. You realize the walls are alive with sound. The thin paper of the shoji screens acts like a giant drum skin, transmitting the faintest whisper, the quietest sigh, the smallest movement of an attendant stirring a charcoal brazier. Therefore, you both instinctively lower your voices to the quietest register, a soft, conspiratorial murmur that forces you to lean closer to hear one another. The architecture demands intimacy, ironically, through the necessity of secrecy. Inside the lady's private quarters, the air is thick with her presence. You notice the personal touches that define her taste and personality, a beautifully arranged spray of seasonal flowers, ikebana, a stack of paper and brushes ready for late-night calligraphy practice, and perhaps a small lacquered box containing her supply of raw incense materials, her secret arsenal of scents. A light joke breaks the tension. You glance down and briefly wonder if, as a guest, you should compliment the arrangement of her floor mats, or if that would be too much. The pressure to be aesthetically appreciative is unrelenting. Lovely bamboo weaving, my lady. Did you source the silk borders yourself? You decide to stick to poetic metaphors about the moon. The quirky or fringe tidbit of the day,
Sleeping arrangements were surprisingly complex and communal. Even in a noble lady's chamber, she was often attended by her most trusted nobu, or a young girl apprentice, sleeping nearby. True, physical privacy was a luxury, reinforcing the necessity of the screens and curtains, and meaning that even your deepest secret conversations were sometimes overheard by a highly discreet, highly loyal, you hope, attendant. She might be physically alone with you, but she is surrounded by her loyal shadow government. The Nyobo who lets you in is the ultimate secret keeper. She has helped the lady prepare for your visit, ensuring the sleeping arrangements are correctly set up. These were often multi-layered, a floor mat tatami, layered with quilted bedding, and finally a sheet or coverlet. The most intimate part of the visit often involved sharing the same coverlet, a quiet, powerful symbol of acceptance and commitment. As you talk, you are acutely aware of the weight of the lady's robes draped over a low stand. It is the elaborate, multi-layered Juani Hotoe, laid out like a silent, brightly colored ghost of her public self. This visual reminder shows you the transformation that takes place in her private space, from the heavily armored, publicly veiled figure to the softer, more vulnerable woman who now speaks to you. Historians still argue whether the complex system of screens and veils was primarily intended to shield women from the male gaze, or if it was also used by the women themselves to manage, manipulate, and ultimately control the moments of social and romantic interaction. Standing here, seeing how she chooses to reveal herself to you through sound, scent, and proximity, you realize it is definitely a tool of empowerment. She determines how much of herself you can access. The conversation deepens further. You move past generalities and begin to discuss the details of your yobai protocol, how often you can visit, the signals you should use, and the most secure routes to avoid detection. This operational planning for secrecy is a testament to the relationship's seriousness. Before the first light of dawn begins to faintly illuminate the shoji screens, the lady might show you her collection of literary correspondence, perhaps a scroll containing an original poem from her mother or a famous courtier. This is an immense sign of trust. It's letting you peer directly into the source of her cultural refinement, sharing the real language of her family and her heart. The lady's chamber, once a mysterious, veiled territory, is now a shared space of intimacy and conspiracy. The architecture, designed for layered secrecy, has become a silent partner in your romance. It has provided the stage for profound, soft-spoken connection right under the noses of her powerful, watchful family.
With the relationship now solidified by hidden vows and intimate access to the lady's chamber, the focus shifts to the delicate, dangerous logistics of sustaining the affair, the midnight rendezvous protocol. This is where romance meets rigorous social engineering. Your visits, known as yobai, night crawling, are governed by a strict, unwritten code. To maintain the fiction of her family's honor and the purity of her reputation, your arrival and departure must be utterly discreet. Mess up the protocol, and the entire edifice of your secret love collapses into public scandal. The mainstream historical fact about these visits is the ritualistic nature of the 3-night visit rule. For a relationship to be formally recognized as a legitimate marriage, even if informal de facto, the man had to visit the woman for 3 consecutive nights. If the man failed to show up on the 3rd night, the relationship was considered broken, the woman's reputation was damaged, and the man was seen as fickle or insulting. You are now well past this point, cementing the relationship, but the need for continuous discretion remains. Your journey across the compound at the hour of the rat, around midnight, is a calculated risk. You must navigate the complex of verandas and gravel paths where stray dogs, dozing guards, or simply poor footing in the dark could lead to disaster. You wear darker robes now, avoiding the brightly colored outer layers of veiwear, which would catch the faint moonlight. The actual approach to her residence is the most sensitive part. As established, you perform the ritualized throat clear, a soft, perfectly timed announcement of your presence. It must be loud enough for the designated attendant, who is waiting for you, to hear, but too quiet to wake the lady's father sleeping on the other side of the compound. You're basically communicating with a secret password via the perfect cough. Time for a light joke about the ridiculousness of it all. You imagine an elaborate grading system for the throat clear. Was it too gravelly? Did the resonance suggest appropriate rank? Did it sound suitably passionate yet unobtrusive? You decide that the entire Han court was one giant silent competition where the ability to cough correctly determined your entire romantic future. A truly absurd and amazing system. The quirky or fringe tidbit concerns the post-coital formalities. After a successful night visit, it was customary for the man to immediately send a morning-after poem, known as Kiniguni no Fumi, delivered by an attendant before the lady had even risen. This poem had two functions. It reassured the woman that the man was satisfied and still committed, and it gave the attendant the opportunity to inform the lady's family that the ritual was complete, thus establishing the legitimacy of the relationship. It's the ultimate high-stakes confirmation text, except it's a handwritten poem delivered at dawn. You, having endured many such dawn departures, know the drill well. You must slip out just before the first light illuminates the screens, a moment known as the beautiful agony of departure. You quickly compose the Kiniguni poem in your head during the walk back, choosing words that capture the melancholy beauty of the separation and the powerful pull of your desire to stay. The pressure to write something brilliant while sleep-deprived and rushing away from your lover is intense. The nyobo plays a crucial, silent role in managing your visits. She ensures the blinds are securely fastened, the kicho is strategically placed, and that the other attendants are deeply asleep or well bribed. Historians still argue whether the nyoba were primarily agents of the family, ensuring the lady's decorum, or were genuinely trusted confidants who prioritized the lady's personal happiness and helped subvert the strict social rules. You certainly treat your lady's attendant as a powerful, benevolent co-conspirator. One of the more humorous aspects of the protocol is the potential for rivals. Since all communication is masked by screens and conducted via intermediaries, it was entirely possible for a rival to send an exquisite waka using an impressive fragrance and calligraphy, temporarily confusing the lady or forcing her to respond out of politeness, even if she had no interest. It's like getting unsolicited, deeply beautiful junk mail. The lady's skill lay in recognizing the true source of the poem, and more importantly, managing the poetry traffic to avoid accidentally encouraging the wrong suitor. Your current challenge is maintaining the frequency of visits. As your attachment deepens, you crave more time, but frequent visits raise suspicion. You must strike the perfect balance between visible commitment and stealth. On nights you cannot visit, you still send a poem, perhaps one that describes the depth of your longing, or a tiny, artful gift tied with silk, a visible symbol of your continuity that keeps the romance alive without the physical risk. You remember an early humorous lesson? Never forget to bring your own sleeping cushion or mat if visiting someone of slightly lower rank. It was a sign of respect and hygiene. It's a very polite, ancient way of saying, "I love you, but I brought my own bedding, just in case." The midnight rendezvous, therefore, is not a simple romantic encounter. It is a highly ritualized dance in the dark, where every gesture, every poem, and every perfectly timed cough reinforces your commitment and secures your fragile position in her life. You are a master protocol navigator, and your smooth execution of the yobai is in itself a form of high-level seduction.
Your secret love,
sustained by coded poems, discreet coughs, and the architectural conspiracy of the palace, exists perpetually in the shadow of the era's greatest literary masterpiece. We now turn to the tale of Genji's shadow, acknowledging the immense, almost suffocating cultural influence of Murasaki Shikibu's epic on the reality of Han love. The mainstream historical fact is that Murasaki Shikibu, a real court lady serving Empress Shoshi around the year 1000 CE, wrote Genji Monogatari, which is often considered the world's first novel. It's a sprawling, multi-generational saga detailing the life and loves of the dazzling Prince Genji, a man of unparalleled beauty, poetic skill, and, let's be honest, romantic ruthlessness. The novel quickly became the cultural blueprint for ideal behavior, aesthetic appreciation, and, crucially for you, the proper execution of a courtship. The influence of Genji was inescapable. If you were a Heian noble, your life, and certainly your romance, was judged against Genji's example. This meant there was an extreme pressure to be aesthetically perfect. Your robes had to be as subtly layered as those described in the book. Your poetry had to capture the same melancholy depth. You were effectively living in a world where everyone was trying to emulate the protagonist of the most famous novel ever written, including you. You realize, with a slight internal shudder, that your lady has definitely read the Tale of Genji. She is consciously or unconsciously comparing your courtship, your poems, your incense, your manners, to the standard set by the fictional prince. This adds a layer of exhausting performance anxiety to every single interaction. You can't just be a good lover, you have to be a literary paragon of romance. A light joke to ease the epic burden. You find yourself meticulously checking your reflection in a polished bronze mirror before visiting her, wondering, do I look princely enough? Did Genji ever have to worry about running out of good aloes wood? The novel has basically turned real life into a massive, multi-volume, unedited reality show with impossible beauty standards. The quirky or fringe tidbit. Because the novel became so crucial to court culture, the various chapters of the Tale of Genji were often used as shorthand to describe romantic situations or character types. You might hear an attendant whisper that a certain woman was a Murasaki type, referring to Genji's beloved, idealized companion, or that a failed suitor had suffered a summa exile, referring to Genji's period of temporary banishment. Imagine your entire lifelike love life being described with chapter titles from a book. It's brilliant and terrifyingly revealing. You discuss this with your lady one night, whispering about which characters you relate to. She might compare your dedication to Genji's constancy, or she might tease you by comparing your poetic skill to one of Genji's less successful rivals. This literary play becomes a new level of intimacy, a shared intellectual language that only those within the highest court circles could understand. It reinforces your bond by making it seem more rarefied, more sophisticated than any common affair. However, the shadow of Genji is not entirely positive. The novel is also a complex portrayal of Genji's serial romantic pursuits, his emotional cruelty, and the suffering he often inflicts on the women he seduces. For your lady, reading the novel provided a blueprint not just for ideal romance, but also a warning label for male emotional manipulation. She is aware of the Genji archetypes of betrayal and abandonment. Your task is to prove you are the ideal, sensitive prince of the novel, and not the callous, charming villain the text occasionally reveals him to be. Historians still argue whether Murasaki Shikibu intended the Tale of Genji to be a celebration of aristocratic life or a subtle, profound critique of the emotional consequences of the sexual and political freedom granted to elite men. For you, this debate is personal. You must ensure your actions demonstrate profound commitment, counteracting the literary temptation to treat women as beautiful, ephemeral objects of desire, as Genji often does. One night, you bring her a copy of a particularly revered chapter, perhaps one that focuses on a character's devotion or a moment of genuine tenderness. You exchange personal, handwritten notes in the margins, a subtle, literary declaration that your real-life commitment transcends the fictional linnets of the text. You observe the architecture one last time, seeing it through the lens of the novel. The vast, curtained palaces in Genji are where beautiful women languish in expectation, waiting for Genji's scented cough to signal his arrival. You realize that your lady's chamber is an extension of that literary landscape, and your role is to continuously rewrite the ending, to move beyond the melancholy ephemerality of the novel and into the messy, committed reality of a sustained relationship. As your time with her winds down, you understand that your romance is a fusion of history, poetry, and literature. Your lady, refined by the ideals of the Tale of Genji, is judging you not just by your deeds, but by your ability to live up to a fictional standard of aesthetic grace and emotional depth. You leave, the scent of her chamber clinging to you, carrying the immense pressure of performing the perfect Genji romance, but aiming for a happier, less complicated ending.
The most dangerous and beautiful moment of the Heian Rendezvous is not the initial approach, nor the intimate conversation, but the enforced, heartbreaking ritual of sunrise, separation, and silence. Having spent the deepest part of the night with your lady, you now face the stark reality of the dawn. You hear the first faint sound of a distant cock crowing, quickly followed by the rustle of the nyobo stirring in her adjacent, highly discreet sleeping area. This is your silent, non-negotiable cue. You must leave before the first light fully illuminates the interior spaces, ensuring your departure maintains the illusion of the lady's impeccable seclusion. If you are seen departing in daylight, her reputation is irrevocably stained, and the entire romance may be destroyed by scandal. You rise quietly from the shared space, the warmth of the quilt still clinging to you. You gather your outer robes, which you had meticulously folded and placed nearby. You can't simply rush out looking disheveled. The smell of her unique incense blend is now deeply woven into the silk of your garments, a scented memory you will carry with you throughout the day. The farewell is often nonverbal, a quiet touch of hands hidden beneath the sleeves of her inner robes, a shared look of exquisite, painful regret. The lady rarely speaks much at this moment. Her sadness, her vulnerability, and her deep longing for your return are conveyed in a final quiet gesture or a whispered phrase. This is the painful beauty of dawn separation. The mainstream historical fact about this ritual is the urgency of the Kinogino no Fumi, the morning after poem, which we touched upon earlier. Your primary task upon leaving is to rush back to your residence and compose this poem immediately. It's a race against the sun. You must write it, scent it, and dispatch it to her via your attendant before she has even finished her morning ablutions. The poem must convey how much you miss her already, and how the chill of the morning air reflects the coldness in your heart now that you are apart. Failure to send the kinoginu was considered a definitive slight, a sign that the man had lost interest. You leave her chamber, moving swiftly but gracefully through the screens and verandas. You perform a final, ultra-soft throat clear for the benefit of the attendant who opens the gate, a sound that is now a private, intimate code between the three of you. The morning air, often damp and cool, hits you like a shock, a brutal contrast to the soft, perfumed warmth of the lady's chamber. A gentle joke to cut the melodrama.
You realize that you've just rushed out of a life-altering romantic encounter, and now your brain is immediately flooded with high-stakes literary demands. Forget the poetry. I need coffee. I am running on fumes and the residual anxiety of a noblewoman's reputation. The pressure to be both a perfect lover and a brilliant, punctual poet must have contributed significantly to the Heian era's pervasive sense of melancholy. The quirky or fringe tidbit concerns the smell of the kinoginu. While all poems were scented, the morning after poem had a specific, subtle pressure. It needed to smell like the man had just left his lover's chamber, a specific complementary blend of his scent and hers. The poem that smelled only of his usual day incense would suggest he hadn't actually spent the night. The scent was the evidence of the rendezvous. As you reach your own quarters, the sun is just beginning to cast long, pale shadows. You grab a writing brush and a piece of paper, the composition of the waka flowing from your emotional state. It's a poem about loneliness and longing, using the imagery of the dew-drenched paths you just traversed. Historians still argue whether the entire kinogino ritual was primarily a way for the man to confirm his intent, or if it was chiefly a safety mechanism for the woman, forcing the man to publicly acknowledge the relationship and protect her honor. Given the precarious position of women in the society, it likely served both functions, but the mandatory nature of the poem certainly put the onus on the man to commit. You dispatch the poem. The small scented paper disappears with your attendant, flying back across the compound. Now, the finality of silence. The period after the kinoginu is one of forced public normalcy. You must go about your court duties, attending meetings, dealing with paperwork, engaging in trivial gossip, all while carrying the heavy, intense memory of the night before. You cannot speak of the lady, cannot acknowledge her presence in the world, or even mention her name. You catch sight of her carriage in the distance as she is transported to a relative's house, a brief, fleeting glimpse of her presence, shrouded by silk and protective screens. We are separated, living our sophisticated, highly structured lives, but connected by the invisible thread of your hidden vow, your shared secret, and the fading scent of her perfume on your sleeve. The beautiful, terrifying game of seduction in old Kyoto is now over, replaced by the profound, sustaining silence of a deep commitment. Now let the soft tide of sleep wash over you. The sun has risen over the mossy, ancient stones of Kyoto, and the silent, scented world of the Heian court has retreated back into history, into memory, and into the pages of silk-bound books. You are no longer navigating the tricky gravel paths in the dark, nor composing desperate poetry under the cruel pressure of dawn. That intense, beautiful game of veils and whispers is done. You can let the tension drain from your shoulders now. There is no need to perfectly clear your throat. No need to worry about the specific shade of silk required for the season. No need to choose the precise scent that conveys both longing and high social standing. The commitment has been made, the vows have been whispered, the poetry has been exchanged, and the secret is safe, tucked away beneath the heavy brocaded curtains of state. Just breathe deeply now, feeling the comforting weight of your own blanket, a simpler, softer covering than the layered silks of the Heian nobility. Let the lingering images of the moonlight on the sliding screens and the distant, soothing sound of the koto fade gently. The danger of scandal is gone. Only the quiet, profound silence of rest remains. Sleep is the ultimate kicho, the deepest curtain that separates you from the worries of the world. Let yourself sink down, anchored by the beautiful, soft silence of your own chamber. The perfume of the past is fading, leaving only the calm, cool air of the present moment.